Marcus Johnson, a veteran Uber driver in Chicago, picks up tech billionaire Victoria Sterling for what seems like a routine ride to her company's emergency board meeting. When Victoria makes a dismissive comment about ordinary people during a phone call, Marcus quietly but respectfully shares his perspective on real struggle and resilience. Unbeknownst to him, Victoria is facing the biggest crisis of her career. Her company is hemorrhaging money due to her disconnect from everyday customers. His words plant a seed that will change everything when she later invites him to share his insights with her board of directors. The October rain drummed steadily against the windshield of Marcus Johnson's Toyota Camry as he navigated through Chicago's downtown traffic. The wipers swept rhythmically back and forth, clearing the droplets that blurred his view of the towering skyscrapers that seemed to pierce the gray autumn sky. At 52, Marcus had been driving for rideshare companies for nearly 8 years, ever since the factory where he'd worked for 23 years had closed down, taking his pension and his sense of security with it. His phone chimed with a new ride request. The pickup location showed a luxury hotel in the Gold Coast district, the Peninsula, Chicago. Marcus adjusted his rearview mirror and straightened his shoulders. He'd learned over the years that rides from five-star hotels usually meant business executives or wealthy tourists, people who lived in a world so different from his own that they might as well have been from another planet. The rain had intensified by the time Marcus pulled up to the hotel's circular driveway. A doorman in an immaculate burgundy uniform stood under a large umbrella, waiting beside a woman who commanded attention even in the dreary weather. She was tall and poised, probably in her early 40s, with sharp features and platinum blonde hair pulled back in a perfect chignon. Her navy blue power suit looked like it cost more than Marcus made in 2 months, and she clutched a leather briefcase that probably cost more than his car payment. Marcus lowered his window. "Victoria Sterling?" he called out. The woman nodded curtly and approached the car. The doorman opened the rear door for her, and she slid in with fluid grace, her expensive perfume immediately filling the vehicle with notes of jasmine and something else Marcus couldn't identify, something that smelled like money. "Sterling Technologies building on West Randolph," she said without looking up from her phone, her voice crisp and businesslike. "And I need to be there in 15 minutes. Marcus glanced at the GPS. The building was 12 minutes away in normal traffic, but the rain had turned the streets into a slow-moving river of brake lights and frustrated commuters. "I'll do my best, ma'am, but the weather's got everyone moving pretty slow today." Victoria Sterling. Marcus recognized the name now, had seen her face on billboards and business magazines, didn't respond. She was already deep in a phone conversation, her voice sharp and authoritative. "I don't care what the board thinks about the quarterly projections," she was saying into her phone, her tone cutting through the sound of rain and traffic. "We're not cutting the marketing budget. If anything, we need to increase it. These ordinary people just don't understand innovation when they see it. They want everything cheap and simple, but that's not where the future is heading." Marcus adjusted his grip on the steering wheel and focused on the road ahead. He'd heard similar conversations countless times from passengers like Victoria, executives who seemed to exist in a bubble, speaking about ordinary people as if they were a different species entirely. Usually he stayed quiet, collected his fare, and moved on to the next ride. But something about her tone, the casual dismissal in her voice when she said ordinary people, struck a nerve. The traffic light ahead turned red, and Marcus brought the car to a gentle stop. In the back seat, Victoria continued her conversation, oblivious to the world outside her corporate bubble. "The focus groups are irrelevant," she continued into her phone. "Regular consumers don't know what they want until we tell them what they want. Steve Jobs didn't ask people if they wanted an iPhone, he just made it and showed them they needed it. We can't let the opinions of everyday people drive our innovation strategy." Marcus watched the pedestrians hurrying past his car, hunched under umbrellas, briefcases and backpacks clutched tight against the rain. A young mother pushed a stroller with one hand while trying to keep her umbrella steady with the other. An elderly man in a worn coat waited at the bus stop, rainwater pooling at his feet. A construction worker sat in his truck, probably on his lunch break, eating what looked like a sandwich from a brown paper bag. These were the ordinary people Victoria was dismissing so casually. These were people like his neighbors, like his daughter Sarah, who worked 2 jobs to pay for nursing school, like his friend Roberto, who ran a small auto repair shop and stayed open late to help customers who couldn't afford to miss work for car troubles. The light turned green and Marcus eased forward. joining the slow procession of vehicles making their way through the financial district. Victoria's conversation continued, growing more heated. "No, I'm not interested in what the customer service department has to say about user complaints," she snapped. "People complain about everything. That's what they do. If we listened to every complaint, we'd never innovate. We'd still be using flip phones and dial-up internet." Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror. Victoria was staring out the window now, her phone pressed to her ear, seemingly unaware of the irony that she was sitting in a car driven by one of the ordinary people she was so quick to dismiss. The silence stretched for a moment after she ended her call, broken only by the steady rhythm of rain and the hum of the engine. Marcus could feel the weight of unspoken words in the air. He'd built a reputation over his 8 years of driving by being professional, courteous and, most importantly, knowing when to stay quiet. But something about this moment felt different. "Ma'am," Marcus said quietly, his eyes focused on the road ahead. "I hope you don't mind me saying, but I couldn't help overhearing your conversation." Victoria looked up from her phone for the first time since getting in the car, catching his eyes in the rearview mirror. Her expression was guarded, slightly annoyed at the interruption. "Yes?" she said, her tone suggesting that whatever he was about to say would be a waste of her time. Marcus navigated around a delivery truck that was double parked, its hazard lights blinking in the rain. "I've been driving folks like you around this city for 8 years now," he continued, his voice respectful but steady. "Business executives, tech innovators, people who are changing the world, and I've noticed something." Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't interrupt. "The most successful ones, the ones who really make a difference, they don't talk about ordinary people like we're some kind of problem to solve or obstacle to overcome." Marcus paused at another red light, choosing his words carefully. "They talk to us. They listen to us, because we're not just consumers or focus group data points. We're the people who actually use the products, who live with the consequences of the decisions made in boardrooms." The car fell silent, except for the rain. Marcus could feel Victoria's gaze on him, could sense her processing what he'd said. He wondered if he'd overstepped, if she would complain to the rideshare company about her presumptuous driver. But something compelled him to continue. "I lost my job 8 years ago when the manufacturing plant where I worked closed down," he said, his voice taking on a more personal tone. 23 years I worked there, building parts for medical equipment. Good, honest work that helped save lives. But the company moved production overseas to cut costs, and just like that, 500 ordinary people were out of work. Marcus turned onto West Randolph, the Sterling Technologies building now visible through the rain-streaked windshield. It was a gleaming tower of glass and steel, reaching toward the cloudy sky like a monument to innovation and success. "I'm not bitter about it," Marcus continued, pulling into the building's circular drive. "That's business, I understand that. But what I learned from that experience is that every decision made in a boardroom affects real people in real ways. The executive who decided to move that plant probably saved the company millions of dollars on paper, but he also put 500 families through hell." He brought the car to a smooth stop in front of the building's impressive entrance, where uniformed security guards stood ready with umbrellas. The meter showed $14.50. Victoria sat quietly for a moment, her phone forgotten in her lap, staring at the back of Marcus's head as if seeing him for the first time. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost some of its earlier sharpness. "And you started driving to make ends meet?" she asked. Marcus nodded, turning to face her through the partition between the front and back seats. "Had to do something. I've got a daughter in nursing school, and my wife works at the hospital, but healthcare costs keep going up faster than her raises. Driving gives me flexibility. I can work around her schedule, be home when she needs me to be." "That must be difficult," Victoria said, and Marcus was surprised by what sounded like genuine concern in her voice. "It's not easy," Marcus admitted, "but it's honest work, and it's taught me something valuable. Every day, I meet people from all walks of life. CEOs like yourself, doctors, teachers, students, immigrants working 3 jobs to support their families. And you know what I've learned?" Victoria shook her head, waiting for his answer. "We all want the same basic things," Marcus said simply. "We want to feel valued, to know that our voices matter, to be able to provide for our families, and have some security for the future. The difference isn't in what we want, it's in what opportunities we've had to get there." The rain had softened to a gentle drizzle, and Victoria seemed in no hurry to get out of the car, despite her earlier urgency about the board meeting. She was studying Marcus's face in the mirror, as if trying to decode something she'd never encountered before. "You're very wise for an Uber driver," she said. then immediately looked embarrassed by her choice of words. Marcus smiled, not taking offense. Wisdom doesn't require a corner office, ma'am. Sometimes it just requires paying attention. Victoria reached for her purse, pulling out her wallet. She handed him a $20 bill, more than a 30% tip. "Thank you," she said, and Marcus could tell she meant more than just the ride. As she stepped out of the car and walked toward the gleaming entrance of Sterling Technologies, Marcus watched her go. He wondered what kind of board meeting awaited her, what kind of decisions would be made in that tower of glass and steel. He hoped that maybe, just maybe, his words had planted a small seed of understanding. The rain had stopped completely now, and patches of blue sky were beginning to show through the breaking clouds. Marcus's phone chimed with another ride request, this one from a community college on the south side. He put the car in drive and pulled away from the Sterling Technologies building, ready to meet his next passenger, carrying with him the hope that sometimes, in the most unexpected moments, people could surprise you by actually listening. Victoria Sterling stood in the marble-floored lobby of her company's headquarters, watching the elevator numbers climb as she waited. The conversation with her Uber driver still echoed in her mind, his words creating an uncomfortable knot in her stomach that she couldn't quite shake. She had built Sterling Technologies from the ground up over 15 years, transforming a small software startup into a billion-dollar corporation. She was used to being the smartest person in the room, the one with all the answers. So why did a few observations from a rideshare driver feel so unsettling? The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing the polished interior that would carry her to the 42nd floor, where the emergency board meeting awaited. As the elevator climbed, Victoria tried to refocus on the crisis at hand. The quarterly numbers were catastrophic. Their latest product launch, the Sterling Home AI system, had been a complete failure. Pre-orders had been strong, but customer satisfaction scores were abysmal, return rates were through the roof, and social media was filled with complaints and negative reviews. The elevator opened directly into the executive floor, where her assistant Jennifer was waiting with a tablet full of updates and a large coffee. "The board members are already in conference room A," Jennifer said, falling into step beside Victoria as they walked down the hallway lined with awards and magazine covers featuring Victoria's face. "Mr. Patterson from the investor group arrived early and he looks concerned." Victoria nodded grimly. Richard Patterson represented the private equity firm that held a significant stake in Sterling Technologies. If he was concerned, that was putting it mildly. She could probably expect a full-scale revolt if she didn't have answers and solutions ready. "What's the latest on the customer feedback?" Victoria asked. Though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer, Jennifer scrolled through her tablet. "The complaints are consistent across all demographics. Customers say the AI system is too complicated, the interface is confusing, and it doesn't integrate well with the devices they already own. Many are saying it feels like it was designed by engineers for engineers, not for regular families." There it was again, that reference to regular people, ordinary consumers. Victoria felt a flash of Marcus's words. We're the people who actually use the products, who live with the consequences of the decisions made in boardrooms. They reached the conference room, and Victoria paused outside the frosted glass doors. Through them, she could see the silhouettes of 12 board members seated around the massive oval table. These were some of the most powerful people in tech and finance, and right now they were all waiting for her to explain how a company that had never had a failed product launch had suddenly stumbled so badly. Victoria straightened her shoulders, pushed the door open, and stepped into what felt like a courtroom. "Good afternoon, everyone," she said, projecting confidence she didn't entirely feel. "I know we're all here because we need to address the Sterling Home AI situation head-on." Richard Patterson, a silver-haired man in his 60s who wore his skepticism like an expensive suit, didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Victoria, we're looking at a $40 million loss on this product launch. Pre-orders were strong, but we're seeing return rates of over 60%. That's catastrophic by any measure." Victoria took her seat at the head of the table, opening her leather portfolio and spreading out the reports she'd been reviewing all morning. "I understand the numbers are concerning, but I believe this is a temporary setback. The technology is sound. Our AI system is more advanced than anything our competitors are offering." "But customers don't want advanced," interrupted Sarah Chen, the board member who represented retail partnerships. "They want functional. They want simple. They want something that works with what they already have in their homes." Dr. Michael Roberts, Sterling Technologies' Chief Technology Officer, leaned forward. "The feedback we're getting is that people find the system intimidating. The setup process requires too many steps, and the voice commands are too specific. Customers are saying it's like learning a foreign language just to turn on their lights. Victoria felt a familiar frustration rising. These are early adoption challenges. Every revolutionary product goes through this phase. When smartphones first came out, people complained they were too complicated compared to flip phones. When streaming services launched, people said they preferred physical DVDs. Innovation always faces resistance from consumers who are comfortable with the status quo. The room fell silent for a moment. Patterson drummed his fingers on the table, a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet conference room. "Victoria," said Janet Morrison, the longest-serving board member and a former CEO herself, "this isn't about resistance to innovation. This is about a fundamental disconnect between what we built and what people actually need." Victoria's jaw tightened. "We built exactly what our market research indicated consumers wanted, a comprehensive home automation system with advanced AI capabilities." "Did we talk to consumers, or did we talk to tech enthusiasts?" asked Sarah Chen. "Because the complaints I'm seeing suggest we might have confused early adopters with mainstream customers." The question hung in the air like an accusation. Victoria looked around the table at the faces staring back at her, some concerned, others frustrated, all of them questioning her judgment for the first time in years. "Our focus groups were comprehensive," Victoria said, but even as she spoke, she was remembering Marcus's words about focus groups being irrelevant. Dr. Roberts cleared his throat. "Actually, Victoria, I've been reviewing our research methodology, and I think we might have a problem there. Most of our focus group participants were recruited from tech conferences and innovation meetups. These weren't typical consumers. They were people already interested in cutting-edge technology." Patterson leaned back in his chair, his expression growing darker. "So we spent 2 years and $40 million developing a product for a market that barely exists." Victoria felt the walls of the conference room closing in. She had always prided herself on making data-driven decisions, on being ahead of the curve, on understanding where technology was heading before anyone else. But sitting here listening to the board dissect her failures, Marcus's observations kept echoing in her mind. The most successful ones, the ones who really make a difference, they don't talk about ordinary people like we're some kind of problem to solve or obstacle to overcome. They talk to us, they listen to us. "We need solutions, not blame," Victoria said, trying to regain control of the meeting. "The product is launched, we can't change that. But we can pivot our marketing strategy, simplify the user experience through software updates, and—" "Victoria," Patterson interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had been through many corporate crises. "We've lost confidence in the current strategy. The board needs to see a fundamental change in approach, not just tactical adjustments." The room fell silent again. Victoria could feel her authority, built over 15 years of success, crumbling around her. She had always been the visionary, the one who could see around corners and anticipate the next big trend. But maybe that had become her weakness. Maybe she had become so focused on the future that she had lost touch with the present. "What are you suggesting?" Victoria asked quietly. Janet Morrison spoke up. "We need to go back to basics. We need to understand our customers, real customers, not just the early adopters and tech enthusiasts. We need to design products that solve actual problems people face every day, not problems we think they should have." "And how exactly do you propose we do that?" Victoria asked, though she suspected she knew where this was heading. Patterson pulled out a thick folder. "We've been talking about bringing in a consumer insights firm, maybe conducting extensive field research, really getting into people's homes and understanding how they live." Dr. Roberts nodded. "I've been saying for months that we need to spend more time with regular users, not in focus groups or surveys, but in their actual environments, watching how they interact with technology in their daily lives." Victoria felt a strange sense of déjà vu. Here she was, surrounded by some of the most accomplished business minds in the industry, and they were essentially saying the same thing her Uber driver had told her an hour earlier. The people who used their products weren't abstract data points or market segments. They were real individuals with real needs and real frustrations. "I want to propose something," Victoria said slowly, an idea forming in her mind that surprised even her. "What if we tried a different approach to understanding our customers? What if instead of hiring another consulting firm to tell us what people want, we went directly to the source?" The board members looked at each other with curious expressions. "What do you mean?" asked Sarah Chen. Victoria took a deep breath, thinking of Marcus and his 8 years of conversations with people from all walks of life. What if we brought in someone who actually talks to regular people every day? Someone who understands their concerns, their challenges, their real-world needs? Patterson raised an eyebrow. You're talking about hiring a sociologist? No, Victoria said, the idea becoming clearer in her mind. I'm talking about someone who doesn't just study people, someone who serves them, who depends on understanding them to make a living. The room was quiet as the board members waited for her to continue. I met someone today, Victoria said, someone who might be able to help us see our customers differently, someone who might be able to help us understand what we've been missing. As she spoke, Victoria realized she was about to make one of the most unconventional decisions of her career. But for the first time in months, she felt like she might be onto something that could actually work. 3 days after the disastrous board meeting, Victoria Sterling sat in her corner office on the 42nd floor, staring out at the Chicago skyline while her untouched lunch grew cold on her desk. The Sterling Technologies building hummed with its usual activity, employees moving through the glass-walled corridors, phones ringing, the constant tap-tap of keyboards creating the soundtrack of corporate productivity. But Victoria felt disconnected from it all, as if she were watching her own company from behind a sheet of glass. The board had given her 30 days to develop a new strategy for understanding and connecting with consumers. 30 days to prove that she could lead Sterling Technologies out of the crisis that threatened everything she had built. The ultimatum hung over her like a storm cloud, and for the first time in her career, Victoria wasn't sure she had the answers. Her assistant Jennifer knocked and entered, carrying a tablet and wearing the carefully neutral expression she reserved for difficult conversations. The consumer research firms have all submitted their proposals, Jennifer said, setting the tablet on Victoria's desk. McKinsey is recommending a 6-month ethnographic study, Boston Consulting wants to conduct nationwide focus groups, and Deloitte is proposing a comprehensive market segmentation analysis. Victoria scrolled through the proposals without enthusiasm. Months of research, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and ultimately more reports filled with charts and graphs that would tell her what people thought, not what they actually needed. Schedule meetings with all of them for next week, Victoria said, though her heart wasn't in it. Jennifer hesitated at the door. There's something else. You have an unusual request that came through the main switchboard. Victoria looked up, curious despite her mood. Unusual how? Someone called asking to speak with you personally, said he was your Uber driver from Monday, and that you might want to hear what he had to say about connecting with regular customers. Victoria felt a jolt of surprise. Marcus Johnson. She had looked him up after their conversation, found his driver profile, seen his nearly perfect 5-star rating and hundreds of positive reviews. She had spent the last 3 days thinking about their brief exchange, his quiet wisdom echoing in her mind during every strategic discussion. He left a number, Victoria asked. Jennifer nodded, clearly puzzled by Victoria's interest. He did. Should I tell him you're not available? Victoria stared at the phone number on Jennifer's tablet. In the business world she inhabited, problems were solved through consultants and committees, through data analysis and strategic frameworks. The idea of calling an Uber driver for business advice was so far outside conventional wisdom that it bordered on the absurd. But conventional wisdom had led her to the biggest failure of her career. Actually, Victoria said slowly, get him on the phone for me. Jennifer's eyebrows rose slightly, but she had worked for Victoria long enough to know when not to question a decision. I'll patch him through in just a moment. Alone in her office, Victoria felt her pulse quicken. What was she doing? How could she possibly explain to the board that she was soliciting business advice from a rideshare driver? But something about Marcus's perspective had stayed with her, had made her question assumptions she had held for years. The phone rang and Victoria picked it up on the first ring. Mr. Johnson, this is Victoria Sterling. Ms. Sterling, Marcus's familiar voice came through clearly, warm but respectful. I wasn't sure you'd actually take my call. I hope I'm not overstepping. Not at all, Victoria said, surprised by how genuine her response was. I have to admit, I've been thinking about our conversation. You said something that's been stuck in my head. What's that? That the most successful people don't talk about ordinary people as problems to solve. They talk to them and listen to them. Victoria paused, gathering her thoughts. I'm facing a situation where I think that insight might be exactly what I need. There was a moment of silence on the line, and Victoria wondered if she had made a mistake, if she was about to hear a pitch for consulting services or some kind of angle she hadn't anticipated. Ms. Sterling, Marcus said finally, I drive people around this city every day, CEOs, janitors, doctors, students, retirees, immigrants. And you know what I've learned? Most folks just want to feel heard. They want to know that their opinions matter, that their struggles are understood. But they also have incredible insights about what works and what doesn't in their daily lives. Victoria found herself leaning forward, genuinely engaged. Can you give me an example? Sure, Marcus said without hesitation. Last month I picked up a nurse from Northwestern Memorial. She was frustrated because her hospital had installed this new digital system for tracking patient information. The system was probably cutting edge, designed by brilliant engineers, but it required 17 different steps to do something that used to take 3 steps with the old system. She was spending more time fighting with technology than caring for patients. Victoria felt an uncomfortable recognition. What happened? Nothing, as far as I know. She and her colleagues complained, but the system had already been purchased and implemented. The hospital administration probably saw it as resistance to change rather than valuable feedback about usability. The parallel to Sterling Technologies' situation was uncomfortable and obvious. Victoria had dismissed customer complaints about their AI system as resistance to innovation, exactly the kind of thinking Marcus was describing. "Mr. Johnson," Victoria said, making a decision that would have seemed impossible a week earlier, "would you be willing to come in and share your perspective with my team? I think we could benefit from your insights." Another pause. "You're serious?" "Completely serious. We're facing a crisis because we've lost touch with our customers, real people who live in the real world, not just tech enthusiasts and early adopters. I think you might be able to help us understand what we're missing." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Victoria could almost hear him processing the unexpected request. "Ms. Sterling, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure what I could tell a room full of executives that they don't already know." "You'd be surprised," Victoria said wryly. "Our last product launch was a complete disaster because we built something we thought people wanted instead of something they actually needed. We've surrounded ourselves with data and analysis, but somehow we've lost sight of the human element." "When were you thinking?" Victoria looked at her calendar, then made another impulsive decision. "Tomorrow afternoon. I'm calling an emergency board meeting and I think you should be there." "A board meeting?" Marcus's voice carried a note of disbelief. "Miss Sterling, I think you might be overestimating what I have to offer. I drive for Uber. I'm not a business consultant." "That's exactly why I want you there," Victoria said firmly. "Everyone else in that room thinks like I used to think. We need someone with a completely different perspective." The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with Victoria explaining the company's situation and Marcus asking thoughtful questions about their products and their customers. By the time they hung up, Victoria had arranged for Marcus to attend the board meeting the following afternoon, though she could tell he was still skeptical about what value he could provide. After ending the call, Victoria sat back in her chair and contemplated what she had just done. In 15 years of running Sterling Technologies, she had never made a decision quite this unconventional. Board meetings were sacred spaces, filled with MBAs and industry veterans, not working-class drivers with high school educations. But as she looked out at the city below, at the thousands of people moving through their daily lives, Victoria realized that maybe that was exactly the problem. Maybe the solutions to their crisis weren't going to come from another consultant or another analysis. Maybe they were going to come from someone who actually understood the lives of the people they were trying to serve. Jennifer appeared at her door again, this time with a concerned expression. "Victoria, I just got off the phone with Richard Patterson's office. He wants to know why you've called another emergency board meeting for tomorrow." Victoria smiled for the first time in days. "Tell him we're going to try a different approach to understanding our customers. Something unconventional. Should I give him more details?" "No," Victoria said, her confidence returning. "Let's let it be a surprise." As Jennifer left to make the arrangements, Victoria turned back to her window. Tomorrow's meeting would either be a breakthrough or a career-ending mistake. But for the first time since the Sterling Home AI launch had failed, she felt like she was moving in the right direction. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number for Sterling Technologies' head of security. If she was going to bring Marcus Johnson into the most important board meeting of her career, she wanted to make sure he felt welcomed, not intimidated. The next 24 hours would determine the future of her company. Victoria had built Sterling Technologies by trusting her instincts, by making bold decisions that others thought were risky. Tomorrow she would find out if those instincts could save everything she had worked to create. Marcus Johnson stood in the marble lobby of Sterling Technologies, adjusting his tie for the third time in 5 minutes. He had put on his best suit, a navy blue outfit he usually reserved for weddings and funerals, but even so, he felt completely out of place among the sleek surfaces and contemporary art that surrounded him. The security guard had been professional and courteous, but Marcus could see the curiosity in his eyes. Uber drivers didn't typically have meetings on the executive floor. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt like ascending into another world. Marcus watched the numbers climb and tried to calm his nerves. What was he doing here? What could he possibly say to a room full of millionaire executives that would make any difference? Victoria Sterling had been persuasive on the phone, but standing here now, Marcus wondered if he was about to make a fool of himself. The elevator doors opened, and Jennifer was waiting for him with a warm smile that helped ease some of his anxiety. "Mr. Johnson, I'm Jennifer, Ms. Sterling's assistant. She's so glad you could make it." Marcus followed her down a hallway lined with awards and magazine covers, past glass offices where people in expensive suits talked on phones and gestured at computer screens. This was the world where decisions were made that affected millions of lives, where strategies were developed that shaped entire industries. "The board members are just finishing up some preliminary discussions," Jennifer explained as they walked. "Ms. Sterling will introduce you in just a few minutes." They stopped outside a conference room with frosted glass doors. Through them, Marcus could see the silhouettes of people seated around what looked like an enormous table. His mouth felt dry and he wished he had accepted Jennifer's offer of coffee. The door opened and Victoria Sterling emerged. She looked different than she had in his car, more tense, but also more determined. Her usual polished confidence was tinged with something that looked like nervous energy. "Marcus," she said, extending her hand, "thank you for coming. I know this must seem strange." "It definitely does," Marcus admitted with a slight smile. "I'm still not sure what I'm supposed to contribute to a board meeting." Victoria's expression grew serious. "Just be yourself. Tell them what you told me. These people need to hear perspectives they've never heard before." She opened the conference room door, and Marcus followed her into a space that was even more intimidating than he had imagined. 12 people sat around an oval table that looked like it could have served as a landing strip for small aircraft. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Chicago, and the walls were lined with monitors displaying stock prices and market data. Every eye in the room turned to Marcus as Victoria led him to a chair at the table. The silence was palpable, and Marcus could feel the weight of their curiosity and skepticism. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria began, her voice carrying across the room with practiced authority, "I'd like you to meet Marcus Johnson. Marcus has been driving for rideshare companies here in Chicago for 8 years, and in that time, he's had conversations with thousands of people from every walk of life. I've invited him here because I believe he has insights into our customer base that we've been missing." Richard Patterson, whom Marcus recognized from business news photos, leaned back in his chair with barely concealed skepticism. "Victoria, with all due respect, we're facing a $40 million crisis. How exactly is an Uber driver supposed to help us solve it?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus felt every person in the room staring at him, waiting to see how he would respond to the obvious dismissal. This was the moment Victoria had warned him about, the moment where he could either justify his presence or confirm their doubts. Marcus took a deep breath and looked directly at Patterson. "Mr. Patterson, you're absolutely right to be skeptical. I don't have an MBA. I've never run a Fortune 500 company, and I don't know anything about your industry beyond what I've read in the papers." Several board members exchanged glances that seemed to say, "This is exactly what we expected." "But," Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger, "I do know something about the people you're trying to sell to, because I spend 8 hours a day listening to them. And right now, they're telling me that companies like yours have forgotten how to talk to them." Dr. Michael Roberts, the CTO, leaned forward with interest. "What do you mean by that?" Marcus looked around the room, making eye contact with each board member. 3 months ago, I picked up a family from O'Hare Airport, the Johnsons, no relation, visiting from Nebraska. The father was a mechanic, mother was a school teacher, 2 kids in high school. Nice folks saved up for a year to take this vacation to Chicago. He paused, noting that he had their attention now. During the ride, they started talking about their smart TV that they'd bought because it was supposed to make everything easier, but they couldn't figure out how to use half the features. The setup process was so complicated that they never got past the basic functions. They felt stupid, like technology was passing them by. Sarah Chen, the Retail Partnerships board member, nodded slightly. "That's exactly the kind of feedback we've been getting about the Sterling Home AI system." "Here's the thing," Marcus continued, his confidence building. These weren't stupid people. The father could rebuild a car engine from scratch, and the mother was teaching calculus to high school students. But the people who designed that TV never thought about how a math teacher in Nebraska would actually use it. They designed it for themselves, for people who love technology for its own sake. Janet Morrison, the longtime board member, spoke up. So what would you suggest we do differently? Marcus thought for a moment, remembering conversations he'd had with hundreds of passengers over the years. Stop trying to impress people with how smart your technology is and start solving real problems they actually have. The room fell silent. Patterson's expression had shifted from skepticism to something more like curiosity. Can you give us a specific example? Victoria asked, encouraging him to continue. Sure, Marcus said. Last week I picked up Mrs. Chen, different Chen. He nodded towards Sarah with a small smile. Elderly lady who lives alone in Chinatown. Her daughter lives in San Francisco and worries about her constantly. Mrs. Chen wants to stay independent, but her daughter wants to know she's safe. He leaned forward, his voice becoming more animated. Now you could sell them a comprehensive home automation system with AI monitoring and predictive analytics and all sorts of advanced features. Or you could sell them something simple, a device that lets Mrs. Chen press one button to let her daughter know she's okay each morning and automatically sends an alert if she doesn't press it by a certain time. Dr. Roberts was taking notes now. That's brilliant in its simplicity. The second option solves the actual problem, Marcus continued. The first option creates new problems while solving problems people didn't know they had. And here's the key. Mrs. Chen would pay just as much for the simple solution because it gives her what she actually needs, peace of mind for herself and her daughter. Richard Patterson leaned forward, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine engagement. You're suggesting we've been over-engineering solutions. I'm suggesting you've been engineering solutions for yourselves instead of for your customers, Marcus replied. Every day, I meet people who are intimidated by technology that's supposed to make their lives easier. They feel like they're failing when really, the technology is failing them. The room erupted in discussion as board members began talking over each other, making connections between Marcus's observations and their own experiences with customer feedback. Victoria watched with amazement as this man who had never set foot in a corporate boardroom facilitated the most productive strategy discussion they'd had in months. Wait, Janet Morrison said, raising her hand to quiet the room. Let's get specific. Marcus, if you were running our product development, what would you do differently? Marcus looked around the room at these powerful, accomplished people who were genuinely waiting for his answer. The surreal nature of the situation wasn't lost on him, but he could see that something important was happening here. First, I'd stop doing focus groups in conference rooms and start going to people's homes, sit in their kitchens, watch how they actually live, see what frustrates them during their daily routines. We could do that, Dr. Roberts said, making more notes. Second, I'd hire people who actually represent your customers, not just people who love technology. Get some single mothers on your design team, some retirees, some people working 2 jobs who don't have time to read instruction manuals. Patterson nodded slowly. Diversify our perspective. And third, Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of 8 years of conversations with struggling families, I'd remember that behind every sale is a person trying to make their life a little bit better, a little bit easier, or a little bit safer. They're not looking for the future, they're looking for help with today. The room fell silent again, but this time it was the silence of people processing profound insights rather than skeptical judgment. Victoria looked around the table at her board members, seeing engagement and excitement that had been missing from their meetings for months. Questions for Marcus? For the next hour, the board peppered Marcus with questions about consumer behavior, about the real concerns of working families, about the gap between corporate assumptions and customer reality. His answers were thoughtful, specific, and grounded in real experience rather than theoretical frameworks. As the meeting concluded, Richard Patterson stood up and extended his hand to Marcus. Mr. Johnson, this has been one of the most valuable board meetings I've attended in years, thank you. Other board members echoed the sentiment, and Marcus found himself surrounded by some of the most powerful people in the tech industry, all wanting to continue the conversation. As the room emptied, Victoria and Marcus stood alone by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city spread below them. You know what the funny thing is? Victoria said softly. Everything you said in there, it's not complicated. It's actually very simple. Marcus nodded. The best solutions usually are. We just make them complicated because we think complicated means smart. Victoria smiled. Well, you've given us a lot to think about, and I suspect this conversation is going to change how Sterling Technologies approaches everything we do. As Marcus prepared to leave, he reflected on the strange turn his day had taken. He had come here expecting to feel out of place, to be dismissed as soon as he opened his mouth. Instead, he had found a room full of successful people who were hungry for the very perspectives they had been ignoring. The elevator doors closed, carrying him back down to street level, back to his car, back to his real life. But something had shifted in that boardroom, not just for Sterling Technologies, but for everyone who had been there to witness it. Sometimes, the most powerful voice in the room belongs to the person who was never supposed to be there in the first place.